Okay, going to do a little bit of a review of what we did today, which is on the idea of tree diagrams. So in the 2016 election, 30 states went to the Republicans and 20 states went to the Democrats. Of the 30 states that went Republican, 29 were in the continental US. Of the 20 states that went Democratic, 19 were in the continental US. One state is selected at random, construct a tree diagram. Okay, so the first thing we're going to split on is we're going to split on not continental, we're going to split on Republican versus Democrat. So what we're going to do is you're either going to be a Republican state or you're going to be a Democratic state. So in this case, we are saying that 30 out of 50 went Republican, 20 out of 50 went Democrat. These are correspondingly, this is the probability of being a Republican, and this is the probability of being a Democrat. Now, the next thing we're going to determine is whether they're in the continental United States or not. So this thing works out where you're in the continental United States. So this one right here is saying 29 were in the continental United States. So 29 out of 30 were in the continental United States, continental US. That tells me that 1 out of 30 were not continental. So this right here is the probability of being not continental given you're Republican. This one is the probability of, right here is going to be the probability of being continental given you're Republican. That would be this number right there. And we would do the same thing for the Democrats. We'd have continental. We'd have not continental. Not continental, so continental same. And in this case, we found out that 19 out of 20 were continental, 1 out of 20 weren't. So again, this is going to be the probability of not being continental given you're Democrat. And this one is going to be the probability of being continental given you're Democrat. Now, the number that would be out here is going to be the probability of being a Republican and continental. And the way we would do that using the rule of independence is we'd multiply these two numbers next to each other. We'd say 30 out of 50 times 29 out of 30. That's going to tell me that 29 out of 50 are continental. This one is going to be the probability of being Republican and not continental. Not continental. And that's going to be this 30 out of 50 times this 1 out of 30. 30 out of 50 times 1 out of 30 gives me 30 out of 50. And then I do the same for this. This would be your probability of being a Democrat and continental. And that's going to be 20 out of 50 times 19 out of 20. And that's going to give me 19 out of 50. And then finally, last but not least, the probability of being a Democrat and not being in the continental United States, 20 out of 50 times 1 out of 20. That's going to give me 1 out of 50. Okay, so let me show you some things that actually are always going to happen. These two branches here should always add to 1. You're either a Republican or a Democrat. These two branches should always add to 1, because if you're a Republican, you're either in the continental United States or you're not. Same thing holds for the Democrats. It should add to 1. One last thing that should add to 1, all 4 of these, because this is all the 4 possible outcomes I could have. So 29 out of 50 plus 30 out of 50 plus 19 out of 50 plus 1 out of 50 should equal 1. Okay, so now we answer questions. Find the probability that a randomly selected state is in the continental United States and went Republican. So this one is asking you continental and Republican. Well, these are the same thing. These are the same thing in this case. What we are going to say is that chances of that happening are 29 out of 50. If we select 4 states at random with replacement, that means we put them back in. What is the probability that at least one of the states in the continental United States and went Republican? Okay, so the probability of at least one, it's a good rule to know, and I mentioned it once in class, but the probability of at least one is 1 minus the probability of none of them being that case. So it's basically saying, what is the probability of you not being continental and going Republican. So in this case, this right here, this 29 out of 50, that's your probability of being continental and Republican, continental United States and Republican. The probability of none is going to be the complement to that. So it's going to be, it's 1 minus 29 out of 50. So in this case, that's going to be 21 out of 50. So what we're saying is that this is your chance of not being continental United States and Republican. So what we need to do is to figure out that probability of at least one. We're going to say 1 minus 4 states at random. We're going to say 1 minus that 21 out of 50 to the 4th power. So what I want to say is 21 out of 50 times 21 out of 50 times 21 out of 50 times 21 out of 50. And what that comes out to is 0.9689. They're saying there's about a little less than a 97% chance that at least one of the 4 people you pick is a Republican. Last thing, given that a randomly selected state is not in the continental United States, what is the probability that it went Republican? So probability, given that you're not in the continental United States, what's the probability of going Republican? From your formula sheet, it is going to be the probability of being Republican and not in the continental United States over the probability of not being in the continental United States. Well, if we look up top, we have those. These people right here. And these people, ooh, there's a mistake. It should be 1 out of 50. Sorry, my mistake. That should have been 1 out of 50. Error on my part. My apologies. I know people probably watching this and saying, you made a mistake. So that's 1 out of 50. So these are the people who are not in the continental United States. These are the people who are not in the continental United States. So what that ends up happening is down here in the bottom, there are 2 sets of people who are not in the continental United States. There are Republicans not in the continental United States. There are Democrats not in the continental United States. How many people are Republican and not in the continental United States? 1 out of 50. So it's 1/50th over 1/50th plus 1/50th. If you put that in your calculator, you're going to find out that that probability is 1/2 or 0.5. Again, if you want to turn these things into decimals, fine, but I'm telling you that's acceptable. I would leave it as a fraction. So in this case, there's a 1 out of 2 chance, a 50% chance that if I randomly picked someone that I knew who wasn't in the continental United States, that person would be a Republican. So that is kind of the idea. Tree diagrams are very, very helpful. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to give you a lot of practice on tree diagrams that we'll work on next class for sure, so that we can kind of feel comfortable working with those. So